You saw it on the ground, smalls, still. Feathers barely there. It was making a sound, not quite a cry, not quite a chirp, something between the two. Something that sounded to you like please. And something in you, something older than thought, older than language, said, pick it up. So you did. You cupped it in both hands. You felt its heartbeat against your palms. You moved slowly, carefully, the way you do when you don't want to make things worse. You thought you were saving it. You thought that was the right thing. You thought that was the kind thing. Here's what the birds thought. The moment your hands made contact with that bird, two adult robins perched 30 feet above you in the branches of an oak tree made a decision, a permanent one, about you, about what you are, about what you will always be from that morning forward. And no amount of good intention, no amount of seed in the feeder, no amount of stillness on the porch is going to change it. Welcome to Secrets Life About Birds. Subscribe before you leave, because what you're about to learn will change the way you see every bird that has ever looked at you. Today, we're going to walk through exactly what happened in that moment, what the parents saw, what they concluded, what they told every other bird on the block, and what they've been doing about it ever since. Let's start with what you thought you saw and what was actually happening. The bird was hopping. That was the first thing, the hopping. Lopsided, effortful, one wing dragging slightly against the pavement like it had forgotten what wings were for. Its feathers were disheveled, puffed out wrong, and it was making that sound again. That small, insistent cheeping that bypassed the brain entirely and went straight to something older. It looked broken. It looked like it had been left. It hadn't been. There is a word for what Dellwood was holding, and most people never learn it until it's too late. A fledgling, not a nestling. Those are the pink, featherless, eyes-still-sealed creatures that genuinely cannot survive outside a nest. And not a full adult. A fledgling is the in-between, the almost. A bird that has left the nest on purpose, by design, because that is exactly what it is supposed to do. Spend 1 to 2 weeks on the ground, hopping, stumbling, building the muscles that will eventually carry it into the sky. Research from the Cornell Lab of Ornithology is unambiguous on this. The vast majority of baby birds found on the ground are not in distress. They are in a developmental stage, working, learning, being watched. 30 feet above Dellwood's head, on a low branch of the oak that overhung the sidewalk, 2 adult robins sat perfectly still. They had been there the whole time. They had watched him stop. They had watched him crouch. They had watched his hands move toward their young. They were still watching. The bird did not need saving. It needed Dellwood to walk away. He didn't. Understand what the robins saw, not what Dellwood meant, not what was in his chest when he reached down. What they saw. A large creature approached. It moved with intention. Not the random drift of someone passing by, but the directed, deliberate motion of something that had spotted a target. It made contact. And then it removed the young from the location where the parents had been monitoring it. 4 steps. That's all it was. And those 4 steps, in the threat assessment system birds have been running for 60 million years, constitute a complete predator sequence. No malice required, no cruelty necessary. The sequence is the signal. A raccoon pulling a nestling from a low branch does the same 4 things. A hawk dropping from altitude does the same 4 things. Dellwood Raines, standing on a Harlem sidewalk in a gray hoodie with his heart full of nothing but concern, did the same 4 things. The robins did not weigh his intentions. They are not built for that. They are built for pattern recognition, and the pattern was complete. In the language the robins speak, a language older than English, older than Harlem, older than humanity. Dellwood had just said something he could never take back. I am the thing that kills your young. The calls started before he reached the end of the block. Sharp, repeating, urgent. Not the casual chatter of birds going about their morning. This was different, structured. The robin pair had switched registers entirely, and anyone who had ever spent real time around birds would have felt it in their spine before they understood it in their brain. Something had changed in the air. What Dellwood heard as noise was, in fact, a broadcast. Research from the University of Washington has demonstrated that bird alarm calls are not simple panic responses. They are encoded communications, carrying information about threat type, threat size, and threat behavior, compressed into vocalizations that other birds parse in real time. A chickadee's alarm call literally changes shape depending on how dangerous the first predator is. The more D syllables stacked at the end of its call, the higher the threat level. The birds are not just screaming. They are filing a report. And the neighborhood was listening. The blue jay on the 3rd floor fire escape heard it. the nuthatch working the alley wall heard it. Every bird within half a block received the same transmission and updated accordingly. Dellwood had already turned the corner. Didn't matter, he had been announced. Every bird on that block had a description. Large, direct, dangerous, before he reached his front door. Now here is where it gets harder to sit with. Everything described so far, the alarm calls, the cross-species broadcast, the threat classification, that is the baseline. That is what happens regardless of which birds we're watching. But there was a blue jay on the fire escape, and if you know anything about corvids, crows, jays, ravens, then you already know that the blue jay changes everything. Corvids remember faces, not vaguely, not approximately. A landmark study from the University of Washington had researchers wear specific masks while trapping and banding wild crows. After the crows were released, the same researchers walked the same routes, sometimes in the trapping mask, sometimes in neutral masks. The crows responded only to the trapping mask. They scolded it. They dove at it. They followed it through the neighborhood. Years later, the same masks provoked the same response. But the detail that should stop you cold is this. Crows that had never been trapped at all began scolding the dangerous mask. They had learned it, from watching, from listening, from the inheritance that moves through corvid populations like a story passed between generations. The blue jay on Dellwood's fire escape was watching when he reached down. It saw his face, it filed it, and next spring, when it has young of its own, and that familiar figure in the gray coat steps outside, it will teach its children exactly who he is. Dellwood Raines is in a threat database now. It has no address, no filing cabinet. It lives in the minds of birds, and it will outlast him. The blue jay is the headline. But it is not the whole story. Most birds on Dellwood's block are not corvids. The robins nesting in the oak, the sparrows working the stoop, the cardinal that claimed the far corner of the fire escape like it paid rent. None of them carry the face recognition architecture that makes crows so unnerving. Science is clear on that distinction. What they carry instead is something quieter, and in some ways more intimate. They remember places. They remember patterns. They remember the shape of a morning. Dellwood fills his windowsill feeder every day at 7. Has done it for 8 months. Same window, same motion, same time. The robins learned his schedule the way a person learns a neighbor's. Passively, completely, without deciding to. That routine became part of the safety map they built around this block. It isn't safe anymore. Now 7 o'clock means something different. Now the window opening means scatter. Birds that once held their ground when Dellwood leaned out to refill the seed, gone before the latch clicks. Not because they recognize his face. Because they recognize everything else as about him. His schedule is the threat profile now, and he hasn't changed a thing. He had started the feeder in October, when the cold came early and the city turned gray before it was ready. Just a small platform outside the kitchen window, a bag of mixed seed, nothing elaborate. He didn't tell anyone about it. It wasn't the kind of thing you mentioned, but he watched. Every morning with his coffee before the block woke up. And somewhere in that first winter, a robin pair claimed the oak 40 feet from his window and stayed. He watched them build. Watched the female sit the nest for 2 weeks straight. Watched the male bring food with a regularity that put most people Dellwood knew to shame. When the chicks fledged, when they made that same stumbling, hopping exit onto the world that he would one day mistake for distress, he watched that too. He had names for them. Private ones never spoken aloud. The kind of names a man gives things he has quietly come to love. That was spring. This is now. The feeder sits full. Has been full for 3 days. The oak on his side of the block stands empty every hour he is home. The robin pair has not returned. You cannot buy it back with birdseed. You cannot explain yourself to a bird. The categorization has happened. The memory has formed, and there is no gesture in Dellwood's vocabulary. No stillness, no offering, no apology. That the robins are built to receive. In 2013, researchers in Seattle returned to a study they had started in 2006. 7 years earlier, they had trapped and banded wild crows while wearing a specific latex mask. Now they walked the same routes, through the same neighborhoods, wearing that same mask among others. The crows remembered, not some of them. Not the oldest ones who had been there for the original trapping. All of them. Including crows that had hatched years after the event. Birds that had never seen a researcher with a net. Birds that had no direct experience of that mask whatsoever. They scolded it anyway. Because somewhere between the generation that was trapped and the generation that came after, the information transferred. Not through language. Not through anything we have a clean word for. It passed the way certain things pass, through proximity, through repetition, through the patient architecture of attention. It is important to say clearly. The crows were not angry. Anger requires something birds do not carry. What they were doing was more precise than anger, and in some ways more permanent. They were remembering. Dellwood is not being punished. He is being known. There is a distance between those two things that matters. One implies the birds want something from him. The other implies they simply have him filed, accurately, indefinitely, in a record that requires no paper and no room. The crow does not hate Dellwood. It knows him. It will know him until it dies. And then it will have taught its children. And they will know him too. None of this means you never intervene. That is not the lesson. There is a creature that genuinely needs you, and it looks nothing like what Dellwood found. A nestling. Featherless, eyes still sealed shut. Incapable of movement beyond a weak trembling. That bird on the ground is in real danger. It has left the nest too early, or fallen, and it cannot survive without help. You will know it when you see it because it looks like something unfinished. Because it essentially is. And here is the thing most people believe that is simply not true. Picking it up will not cause the parents to abandon it. Birds have almost no olfactory sense. They are not smelling your hands. The idea that human scent permanently contaminates a baby bird has been repeated so many times it has the texture of fact, but it isn't one. If you can locate the nest and safely return a nestling to it, do that. The parents will still have cataloged your presence. That part is unavoidable, but the bird will live. The rule Dellwood needed was this: feathers, movement, noise. If the bird on the ground has all three, it is not in distress. It is in process. Your job in that moment is not rescue. It is restraint. Walk away. Bring your cat inside. Let the parents, watching, always watching, finish what they started. There is no reversal. The birds have already decided. Dellwood cannot go back to the morning before. He cannot unkneel from that sidewalk, uncup his hands, unfeel the heartbeat against his palms. The robins made their assessment in real time, and it has been filed in a place he cannot reach with any gesture he knows how to make. What he can do is stop adding to it. No approaching nests, no leaning out the window to check on them. No slow walks past the oak to see if they've returned. Every time he places himself near something vulnerable, he reactivates the classification. He is not visiting. He is threatening, whether he means to or not. The distinction lives only in him, so he pulls back. Fills the feeder at 7, same as always, but retreats immediately. Moves slowly through his own yard. Keeps his hands to himself. Becomes as much as a person can, predictable and small and unthreatening. Not because it will fix what happened, but because it is the only direction that leads anywhere better. Recovery, if it comes, is measured in seasons, not days, not gestures. The alarm response fades on its own timeline, not his. Dellwood thought he was saving something small and helpless. What he didn't know, what none of us know until it's too late, is that in nature, there are no neutral gestures. Every action is read, every approach is judged, and the birds were watching long before you knew they were there. Have you ever picked up a baby bird? Did the birds in your yard start acting differently afterward? Tell me in the comments. I read everyone. I'll see you in the next one.